Lenin originated a new disinformation program in 1902. He created a number of mass organizations intended for wide membership and which, therefore, can be as loose and as public as possible.
In order, however, to appeal to much larger audiences, they created front organizations.
Headquartered outside of Russia and pretending to be independent international entities, these tentacles of Soviet power grew into homegrown disinformation efforts that still haunt us today.
Organizations that had as their mission to conquer the minds in the West, but not in a direct way like the communist parties.
When I was granted political asylum in the USA, I found out that most people in American intelligence, the military, and the media did not even know what disinformation really meant. Because of that, few outsiders knew how these front organizations operated, or that they were in fact disinformation outlets, financed and managed by the KGB community. Even fewer know that this immense machinery is still alive today.
The smart leaders would not allow on their platforms people who would mess with the front group message. The long-term goal is to create a communist United States, but they wouldn't allow into their literature or on their platforms people calling for a communist United States because they want as broad, they want to suck in as broad a group as possible.
In 1949, the most influential such group was founded and given the respectable name of the World Peace Council. Its mission was to prove that the U.S. was a warmongering Zionist country financed by Jewish money and run by a greedy Council of the Elders of Zion.
And one of the magnets to attract, via disinformation, supporters for these fronts was peace.
In the 1970s, all WPC national branches initiated demonstrations against the American war in Vietnam. An international appeal in typically Soviet-style language issued by the World Peace Council called upon the people of the world to organize unprecedented mobilizations against American imperialism.
The World Peace Council was a very big organization, and it seemed international. We knew it was a cover organization for the Soviet Union and part of the propaganda machine.
With the demise of the Soviet Union in 1991, Moscow newspapers reported the World Peace Council had received policy guidance and 90% of its funding from the Kremlin. Over the years, the Soviet-affiliated World Workers' Party created several front organizations such as ANSWER. ANSWER has helped to organize many of the largest anti-war demonstrations in the United States, including demonstrations of hundreds of thousands against the war in Iraq.
If you say that you want America to lose the Cold War, or you think that the attacks of 9/11 were justified, or that you want a revolution in America, you know, you'll isolate yourself. So leftists never say what their agendas are. They tell you that they're for peace. We have these anti-war movements, which are nothing of the sort. The last big anti-war movement was about the war in Iraq. It wasn't an anti-war movement. It wasn't a peace movement. There was never a demonstration in front of the Iraqi embassy calling on Saddam Hussein to obey the 16 and then 17 UN resolutions to honor the truce he had signed in the Gulf War, which is what the conflict with Iraq was about. Not a single demonstration. All the demonstrations were attacks on America. The anti-war movement is the hate America left. That's what it is. And a lot of well-meaning people who are duped into thinking that this is really a peace demonstration.
Most believe that disinformation is an obsolete Cold War phenomena, but the continued life and growth of many front groups shows that belief to be disinformation.
Many front groups also began as part of a liberation movement against imperialist governments and bourgeois religions. These revolutionary movements were often secretly organized, infiltrated, and sponsored by the KGB, and worked from directives dictated by Moscow. The Palestine Liberation Organization, the National Liberation Army of Bolivia, the National Liberation Army of Colombia, the Secret Army for Liberation of Armenia, and the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine are but a few of the liberation groups that have terrorized the world and outlived their KGB creators. In 1961, the Kremlin opened another front in their war on religion by secretly infiltrating the World Council of Churches. From its beginning, Marxism itself was a religion that could coexist with no other. and in a basic sense, reads like a Christian heresy. In traditional Christianity, the glorifying of human nature takes place because of Christ's incarnation. In Marxism, the state takes Christ's place. Marxism even offers a theory of sin and salvation, with private property as the sin and collective ownership the salvation. As such, the state becomes a church that dispenses grace.
ACLU has done a lot of damage to this country. I think taking off the 10 Commandments out of every high school in America is horrible. I mean, I ask my people once in a while, tell me, is America better off today with Christianity in the corner, pushed down?
Building on one small truth, that God cares about the poor, the Kremlin invented liberation theology, one of the greatest disinformation campaigns against Christianity. Liberation theology proposes to combine the teachings of Jesus with the teachings of Marx as a way of justifying violent revolution to overthrow capitalism, thus becoming a version of Christianity that seems to endorse socialism. By the late 1960s, the WCC had essentially abandoned traditional Christian beliefs and instead focused on political and economic liberation. The WCC and eventually the National Council of Churches came under the authority of the International Department of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union and received most of their funding from the Soviet Peace Fund.